topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hi, welcome to Learning to Dance in the Rain. Doesn't that music make you want to dance? Wow, I guess it bugs me all the time, turns me on. Hi, I'm Shelby Wagner, host of Learning to Dance in the Rain. And here's the pictures of my two books, Learning to Dance in the Rain, Surviving Grief, Internet, Dating, and Romance Scams, and my latest book, Scams, a Resource Guide to help you recognize a scam when you hear one before you lose your shirt. Don't lose your shirt to a scammer. We're going to talk a little bit about those things today. I would like you to know that my books are available on Amazon.com, and I appreciate it if you take a look at them. And I wrote them to help you save your money and save your heart, and I hope that does meet my objectives. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm really quite excited to introduce my guest, Matt Thornton, and we've talked several times. I really have enjoyed every one of them. Matt is a Vice President in Business Development for Eagle Investigative Services Incorporated, and currently he's the principal operator. He's been a licensed investigator for 7 years. He's performed investigations utilizing the Eagle Investigative Analysis method for capital crimes, unsolved homicides, and post-conviction relief cases. He has secured contacts with U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force for genealogy research services to assist the repatriation of MIA and KIA soldiers from World War II. He currently manages a team of 23 genealogy researchers and certified genealogists, and the team has solved over 2,000 cases for the U.S. Army. Oh my, I've got 2 more paragraphs to read about Matt, but you know what? I'm going to have him come on stage and tell us about him himself. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hey, Shelby. I'm doing well.
Welcome to my show, and let's get going here. What is an investigative person? Really, we see them on TV, in movies. Now you tell me what you do.
Yeah. So I guess you had Magnum PI, right? Everybody.
Oh, yes.
We try not to use that PI word because generally when especially when attorneys hear the word PI, they kind of put you into a box that really isn't who we are. Yeah, I've chased cheating spouses. The first cheating spouse case that I dealt with, the cheating spouse was a female police officer, and she had an affinity for firemen, and so her husband hired me to follow her, and so I did, and she had a very lead foot. So when you got a lead-footed cheating spouse in a police car, that makes it a little bit more difficult, but definitely solved the case, and he got custody of children, which is what he wanted. So that was very cool. So that's really not what we do. We specialize in complex investigations. We do a lot of work with finding people is something that we really do a lot of, and so that's what we do with our contract with the U.S. Army, and so that helps. And then one thing I have personally gotten involved with is post-conviction relief. So these are A lot of people refer to it as unsolved homicide. Unresolved wrongful convictions, should I say? And although the courts don't like that word, because if someone has been convicted and it's not, they don't consider it wrongful, even though it may have been the wrong person. So post-conviction relief is what it is, and that's something that a lot of people don't know a lot about. Is that one in five criminal convictions potentially are the wrong person, and that's a little scary. So those cases can be obviously very rewarding in helping someone who is in prison that shouldn't be. So we just do the investigative side of things, and so that kind of morphs into the whole cold case, because if the wrong person has been convicted, then it truly is a cold case, right? And so we need to find out who actually did it. So those investigations are very similar. A cold case investigation and a wrongful conviction. Go ahead.
We have a question. That's what they want to know is, what do you have to do to become a private investigator?
Yeah, that's a good question. Every state is different. I don't know what state this caller is in, but in South Carolina, there is an agency, a law enforcement agency that controls the private investigation industry, and you have to register as a private investigation company, and you have to meet certain requirements. Our Eagle was formed by a gentleman named Jimmy Karsten, who was 22 years U.S. Army CID special agent, and so his qualifications were more than enough to become a private investigation agency in South Carolina. So I know Georgia is a little different than South Carolina. We are registered in both Georgia and South Carolina. But so every state is a little different. I say whatever state you're in, I would just Google it and see what it would take. And I know in South Carolina, you get on their website and it gives you all the information on the requirements and all the documentation that's needed and that type of thing.
What was that website you need to go to find all of that information?
In South Carolina, it's called SLED, S-L-E-D, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. And but like I say, in every state, it's different and different requirements. Yeah.
All right. We had another question: is what brought you to this line of work?
Wow, that's a good question. So I was 30 years in the textile industry, and those of you that know anything about the textile industry, it wasn't like we were making buggy whips or stagecoaches, right? The famous picture of stagecoaches being delivered by a train, right? How ironic was that? So, but we're all still wearing clothes, and fabric is still being made. It's just being made somewhere else, like halfway across the world. And so I'm a refugee of that industry, and I was doing business coaching for transitioning soldiers for the U.S. Army out of Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. And I met Jimmy Karsten, and he came to one of my classes, and I was helping him with his business plan. And I got so involved and so interested in his business that I quit my coaching business and came to work for him. And it's kind of interesting because I was kind of intimidated, because this is a gentleman who, the training that he got in the U.S. Army, the equivalency I give it is high school football versus the NFL, as far as the amount of training and expertise and experience that he got in the U.S. Army versus the similar type of training experience with law enforcement gets today. And so I was a little intimidated, needless to say, like, how can I learn this? I'm getting old, and how can I learn this? But what I soon learned was, it's not rocket science to be a good investigator. What it is a lot of hard work. And I mean a lot of hard work. And so I was used to working hard, so that wasn't a big deal. And then I had the greatest mentor ever, which is Jimmy Karsten. And so I've been doing this for 7 years, and I can tackle any investigation that you can throw at me. And of course, I've got him to lean on too, which helps a lot. So that's how I got into it.
Can you tell a little bit about what do you do first when somebody hires you to find somebody or investigate a case? What do you do?
Yeah, so two things. So let's say we get obviously we work through a lot of attorneys, and so the first thing that you do when you're doing an investigation is, especially if it's a cold case or a case that that someone else has worked, which generally is the case. That's generally what happens, right? The case has been worked by somebody, either another investigator or law enforcement. And so it's very important to get all the information. You've got, that's, as an investigator, you're an information collector. And so you're collecting as much information as humanly possible. So if it is, let's say it's a cold case, and I want to go back to that word cold case. Okay. So if you look at the definition of a cold case, you look at Webster's definition, it basically says a cold case is a case where every lead has been investigated. Every stone has been overturned. And there's just nothing left, and they're just totally at a standstill. That is a cold case. That is a cold case, and that's the definition of a cold case. Cases that I have worked that are unsolved, the FBI uses the word unresolved. That's the word that they use. And an unresolved case is one that has been worked, but not fully. It's for various reasons, the investigation has stopped. And so they're unresolved. They're not technically cold cases. But I use the word cold case because that's what everybody knows what that is. It's an unresolved homicide. Okay. And so a little history of unresolved homicides. Okay. So in 1965, the homicide clearance rate was 95%. So 95% of all homicides were cleared in 1965. Okay. Today, it's 50%. It's a 50-50 proposition. If someone you know or someone you love is a victim of a homicide, it's a flip of a coin as to whether or not they're going to catch the perpetrator. And if anybody on this call thinks that that's acceptable, I'd like to have a conversation with you, because it's not acceptable. And there's a lot of reasons why. There's a ton of reasons why. A lot of it is lack of resources. You'd think, and a lot of the comments I get afterward is, a lot of is, gosh, with all the technology today, you'd think they would be easier to catch them. And so, it's a blessing and a curse, the technology, because I think everybody wants to use DNA. Oh, we use DNA. Yeah, DNA solved this, DNA solved that. There's only available DNA. Okay, so that's DNA that's available at a crime scene to solve a case in 10% of homicides. So DNA ain't the answer. Okay, it has solved a ton of cases, no question about it, and has solved a lot of cold cases. And some cold cases have been sitting waiting to have DNA testing done. Okay, and so it's great. It works, and it's wonderful. But I think a lot of times it kind of may make people a little lazy, thinking, oh, we'll just use DNA to solve this when it's not even available. So anyway, lack of training, and that's where we try to make a difference, is the training in how to perform an investigation properly. And that goes back to the training from the U.S. Army. So the training to actually work and try to solve and investigate a case like this, and doing it properly, is the key. And I've yet to find one that's been done properly. So anyway, so that's, that's where we are as far as cold cases go. So when you get a cold case, you want to get everything. You want to get the initial police reports. You want to get everything that's what's called discovery. Okay, that's what is there, what is in the case, what are all the and you can FOIA that. FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. You can FOIA that information. Now, the problem is a lot of the information is redacted. So some of the key information that you may need has been redacted on those, and it is what it is. But the important thing when you're working on a case like that is to go back to what we call first vantage point. You go back to where the actual crime happened. I mean, literally standing in the exact spot where the crime happened, and you do a 360. You look for cameras, you look for neighbors, you look for all kinds of things. And let me give you an example. So we're working we're working on a post-conviction relief case. Okay. So the post-conviction relief case is 10 years old. Okay, it's a 10-year-old case. So this person has been sitting in prison for 10 years for a crime that we don't think that he did. Okay. So we went to First Vantage Point because at this point, that's when we became involved in the case. First Vantage Point was the street out in front of the house where the crime happened. Okay. So we stand in the street and we do a 360. We literally, Jimmy and I did a 360. We looked everywhere. Are there cameras anywhere? Are there anything? The next door neighbor is out in his yard. So I walk over, introduce myself, tell him who I am, what I'm doing there. And I said, do you remember a crime that happened next door 10 years ago? And he goes, oh, absolutely I do. I said, okay. I said, did law enforcement ever come and ask you about this, about what you saw, what you heard that night? Nope. I said, okay. Did a defense attorney ever come to you and say, hey, a crime happened next door on this day. Do you know anything? Did you see anything? Nope. I said, so nobody has talked to you about that case that happened 10 years ago until today. He goes, you're right. That's right. Therein lies the problem. How many on this call watch Chicago PD? Shelby, do you watch Chicago PD?
I don't know.
It's the best show on television, I think. Of course, I'm kind of
Chicago NPD?
No, Chicago PD.
Oh, Chicago.
There's also Chicago Fire.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
Chicago Fire. Okay, it's all done by Dick Wolf, and Dick Wolf is the Law and Order. So Dick Wolf started with Law and Order. Okay, everybody that's been around forever. But so he started Chicago PD and Chicago Fire. Chicago PD is awesome. The guy, Hank Voigt, who is the sergeant, is just a man. He is the man. Anyway, so one of the first things he says whenever there's a crime, canvas interview, go talk to all the neighbors, right? That's the first thing you do. When there's a crime, law enforcement, that's the first thing you should do is go talk to the neighbors, do a canvas interview. That is blocking and tackling. That's basic investigation 101. And
you think of that automatically. I mean, that'd be the first. Yeah.
That's the first thing you should do.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why I say it's not rocket science. So it wasn't done. It wasn't done by law enforcement, and it wasn't done by the defense attorney. If it had been done by either one of those things, this gentleman would not have been put in prison. Is that sad?
Yeah, really. 10 years of his life. Yeah.
He's still in there. It's been 12 now.
Oh, it's still there. Oh my.
Still there. I was involved in the hearing, and hopefully he's gonna get out. But it's just so because for for these cases, post-conviction relief cases, you've got to prove, in South Carolina, you have to prove insufficient defense counsel. Okay? So the defense counsel was insufficient in his defense of this case. Okay? Well, that was number one on the list, right? That he didn't do canvas interviewing, and if he would have, here's what he would have found. And that person that I talked to actually got up on the stand and for the hearing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There were 21 other things the defense counsel didn't do either. And there's 21 other things that the law enforcement didn't do in the case. Okay. So we're not bashing law enforcement. We do not bash law enforcement. A lot of it is they just don't have the resources and the time to do these things properly. But the defense attorneys, what are you going to do about them? But the prosecutors, if you read this case and you looked at the information that the prosecutor had in order to even bring this case to trial, it's a joke. An absolute joke. There was no evidence, zero evidence. It was the testimony of a very deranged crack addict that ultimately put this dude in jail. But no evidence, no physical evidence, no phones, no cell phone records, no canvas interviewing. None of this stuff was ever done. So it became theatrics. It became courtroom theatrics to get this dude convicted. And that is wrong. That is wrong. I don't care who you are, that is wrong. And so those are the kind of cases that we love to wrap around because I did a full investigation of this case. And then I gave it to the post-conviction relief attorney, which gave her so many things. She said, I'm used to having one thing that I can really pin on the defense attorney that he didn't do. He said, you've given me 21 things.
Oh, wow.
So that's the difference in what we can do to help this. And so cold case, and so it is a cold case, right? If he didn't do it, who did? Who did do it? And so in our investigation, we know who did it. And these are people that law enforcement knew of, but never interviewed. Did not interview whatsoever. None. They drew their conclusions, and by God, they rammed it home. And that's exactly what happened in this case. So cold cases, generally unsolved homicides, okay, are very similar in that a lot of the details and just were never actually done. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we try to do is get that done.
I was watching, I don't remember something the other day, but it seemed like the law enforcement agents, well, number one, they wanted an easy solve.
Yeah.
And fast. And so right away, they blamed the husband.
Oh, sure.
When the wife was missing. And I guess a lot of, how often is it true that the spouse is the committer of the crime?
Yeah, if you go back to those numbers, the 65 numbers, the 95%, a lot of crime back then was done by people who know each other. Okay. Whereas today, society is so different than it was in 1965. It actually, those numbers were from the early 60s, I believe. But so there's some, people travel more. There's a lot of transient people. These are crimes of that are random acts of violence and that type of thing. So that has a lot to do with those numbers being the way they are today. Yeah, if your spouse is has passed away, you're going to be the first person. And I've got it written down on my board here: no poly, no waiver, no statement. So you just go ahead and just lawyer up immediately. Don't even think about talking to anybody without an attorney present, that type of thing. So no polygraph, don't sign any kind of waivers, and never make a statement without an attorney present. That's just, everybody should know that. I know they don't, but
Well, a lot of times that people would think, well, I'm innocent, so
yeah,
you just innocently fall into their trap.
wrong. Dumb.
Think you're innocent until proven guilty, but it seems nowadays you're guilty.
Yeah, and again, I'm not bashing. We need to make sure everybody realizes we're not bashing law enforcement. They have an incredibly tough job. It gets tougher every day. But they also do some things that don't help their cause. And so then there's a lot of great law enforcement officers out there that do investigations properly. But, I know you and I are old enough, Shelby, the Lucille Ball show. Okay. There's a famous skit that she does where she's working in a candy factory. Mm-hmm. You remember that? And the candy is in boxes and it's going across a conveyor belt. And so she has to put a lid on it and wrap it up. Well, they're going by so fast that she starts eating the candy and the boxes are falling off the end of the boxes are falling off the end of the belt. Well, that's what happens. That's what happens in law enforcement. There are so many cases that they just can't do it all. It's impossible. And therein lies part of the issue that we're trying to help solve, is that really law enforcement really isn't prepared to do all these investigations, right? They had enough trouble just trying to keep the living people safe. Mm-hmm. And so this training, and they need to hand these cases over to somebody else. And another thing, there's only one thing that some statistics that we found: only 7% of all law enforcement agencies in the nation, and there's 18,000 of them, only 7% have a formal, trained, and active cold case unit. Only 7%. But some agencies do. They have dedicated investigators who do nothing but work on unsolved homicides. But yet a lot of these smaller agencies, they can't afford that. They just can't. And so if you live in a rural area and you're someone you know or love is a victim of an unsolved homicide, the chances of them solving that are very, very slim. And they need to turn that over to the civilian, civilian groups like ours that can help to do that. Now, Georgia has passed a law that they can only hold on to a case for 3 years. If a case is not solved after 3 years, then it goes to a group at the University of Georgia who will review the case and determine what needs to be done next. And that's a huge step. That's a huge step. A lot of that was done by the Innocence Project of Georgia to get that legislation done. But if you've got a case that's 30 years old and law enforcement won't release the information to the public, come on. We're just waiting for more evidence. Really? After 30 years? That statement right there is absolutely ridiculous. So like I say, they really don't, at times they don't try to really help themselves in getting out of this, because we figured that uncleared homicides are growing at an annual rate of 6,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you that 50% is only going to get worse. It's going to be, because you look at the graph, you look at the line of where it's going, and that line has gone from 95 to 50, and it shows no sign of going back up. And so we have a solution now, getting people to listen to us, therein lies the challenge. And so, you know, you and I met on LinkedIn, and you've been on our podcast, which is not, we haven't rolled it out yet, but the whole purpose of our podcast is try to raise awareness for what's really going on out there in the real world. And then we do have a solution. That solution is to train civilians to be able to work these cases in conjunction with law enforcement to try to bring this number back down to a reasonable level. And so, you know, that's Jimmy Carson's mission. We get punched in the nose often, and one of these days, I hope he doesn't say the heck with it. I'm going to do something else. But that's really his mission, and one of the reasons I got jumped on board with him, because ultimately we have that mission. And it's been very, very, it's like pushing a rope uphill. It's been extremely difficult. And the thing is, there's splinter groups all over the country, right? You heard about Innocence Project here, and you know, all these people, but nobody's getting together and to work as one big group. That, you know, it's all about numbers, right? If you get enough people out there, then that really helps. I think there was another question.
I haven't seen one go across the screens lately,
Okay.
but let's see what I had written down there.
Okay.
You said you train civilians. How does
We do.
someone listening who might be interested in helping in this way, where would they start learning to?
Yeah.
how to do
So
this?
I'd say the best thing, like Shelby, is to contact me directly. You can reach me at my number. It's 864-979-3626. 864-979-3626. That's my direct number. Reach out to me. And it's just, the key is finding people who have the same, I guess, the same mission. And the you know, a lot of the people who we've worked with in the past that have been the most effective are families of victims, you know, because they get it. If you're the family member of a victim of an unsolved homicide, you get it, because you've been through the frustration.
Mm-hmm.
You've been through being pushed away and told and lied to and all that kind of stuff. So those seem to be about the best.
Mm-hmm.
One of our first successes, there was a group of ladies in Sumter, South Carolina, and they were all in their 70s and 80s. And one of the members, they were a garden club, and one of their members disappeared out of her home, and she's never been found since. And we trained that garden club, all those ladies, on how to investigate that missing, it's really a missing person case, how to do it themselves. And they did a wonderful job. They did a great job of investigating, and they gave their report to the local sheriff, and the local sheriff thinks they know who did it, but they've not arrested anybody yet. So
Well,
that's all you can do. That's all you can do,
right
at that point. So that kind of proved the fact that we truly think we can train anyone. This is not rocket science. It's not what? It's not rocket science.
Oh. Too bad.
It's following a system. It's following a system and following it to the T. That's it. And the system works. It definitely works. So anyways, there was another question, somebody about how I got this far, something like that. Well,
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I think I missed it.
Can we? Oh, here it is. What changes to make it go so far, or what changed to make it go so far?
So you're talking about the I'm assuming you're talking about the
Number of
homicide,
homicides.
the rate of clearance.
Uh-huh.
That's a good, we came up with 3 reasons: resources, lack of training, or, really lack of resources, lack of training, and poor case management. Okay. Thank you. Poor case management. It's just, which is leadership. Case management is leadership. So we see investigative reports that have not even been signed by the superior officer. They've not been signed off. So we get, when we FOIA all the information on a case, and you look at the incident reports and all of the investigation that was done by law enforcement, and there's a line at the bottom for the supervisor to sign off on the case. And very, very rarely do we see a signature there, which tells you one thing, right? Nobody ever looked at it. That's all. The only thing you can surmise from that, right? And so you talk about frustrating. And so again, this is the training that Jimmy got in the Army. And I know I keep throwing that out, but it is truly the best training. Those of you that are in the military, you know this. It's the best training on the planet. I don't care what occupation it is, it's the best. And the law enforcement training and the investigative training that Jimmy Karsten got when he was a 22-year U.S. Army CID special agent. Everybody knows NCIS, right? Shelby, have you watched the NCIS?
Yeah, I watched that.
Well, CID is the same thing as NCIS, except it's in the Army. Okay? So the NCIS is Navy and Marines. The Army is 4 times bigger than the Navy and the Marine Corps. So CID is pretty daggum important. And when he was there, you actually were a green suiter. You were a member of the U.S. Army, whereas NCIS is civilian. A lot of it's retired, or former military. But so that kind of training, and it was all about task management and oversight of the cases. So that because nobody's perfect, you're going to miss stuff. But if it's oversighted by a superior who looks at it and says, "Hey, you missed this. You didn't dot that I. You didn't cross that T." That's how it works, and that's the difference. It's the oversight and case management to make certain that nothing is missed. And so back to the prosecutors. So if the prosecutors would tighten down and kick these cases back to law enforcement, it would force them to do a better job. They're allowing cases to come before them that have not been investigated properly. I've seen it numerous times. So
Is it because they want to get it done fast too? Just the law, like
and again, they've got a whole slate. They've got a pile of cases that they've got to get through their system. But if they would tighten down, then it would. I think you'd get better results out of law enforcement because they would cross those T's and dot those I's and do a better investigative job. Now, defense attorneys, that's a whole nother ball game, because when you go to law school and you become a defense attorney, you and the American Bar Association has guidelines on what, if you're a criminal defense attorney, okay, if you put your shingle out as a criminal defense attorney, you sign a pledge, and it's actually in the statute in South Carolina that you will perform a complete and thorough investigation of your cases. It's in there. And I'm telling you right now, That does not happen. That does not happen. Defense attorneys do as little as they possibly can. And their famous line is, just plead. Just plead and yeah, I know you didn't do it, but just take 5 years and let's just get this behind us. This case that I told you about, this wrongful conviction case, they gave this gentleman 8 plea deals. 8. That's unheard of. And he said, no, I didn't do this. I am not pleading. I'm not going to go to jail. I did not do this. I'm not going to accept these plea deals. But that defense attorney, until even during the hearing, well, he probably should have taken the plea. I'm like, what?
What?
Talk about it. That's just a cop out. So anyway, I think I'm not throwing, we're not throwing law enforcement under the bus. They are absolutely overworked, underpaid, and undertrained. But if the prosecutors would tighten up and require sound physical evidence and did, in this world of digital, doing a digital forensics on a laptop or a cell phone, that should be automatic. And the state of South Carolina will pay for that. Actually, the state, and a lot of states will do this, they'll pay for all that work. They'll pay for the digital forensics, and they'll pay for DNA testing. And so there's no excuse. Okay, oh, well, it's indigent defense and we couldn't afford it. No, that does not work. And so everybody just needs to tighten down and tighten up on these cases. And that would help tremendously.
I don't understand how an attorney, if he knows his client is guilty, how he can defend him and get him up.
Yeah, that's a tough one, Shelby. I'm with you. And we have had a few cases where people have come to us and they're like, well, yeah, my son did pull a gun on the convenience store clerk, and he got 30 years, but he only should have gotten 15. We're like, sorry. We do not work those types of cases. Now, they may be right. The sentence may not have matched the crime, but we do not work those types of cases. And the attorney, in our judicial system, everybody has rights to a fair trial, and so and that's another thing. We all know that there's cases out there where people get off on a technicality, right? Mm-hmm. And they actually did it, but they got off on a technicality, and that's wrong. But then again, so in my case, with the case I worked, so our guy got convicted, and there was like no technicalities, there was no nothing. So yeah, I know that is a head scratcher.
So we need more police officers, troopers, and we need more people working vaccine.
I think that is kind of a solution. Yeah, that is kind of a solution. Have civilian groups that are legitimate, that are trained, and actually our training, we certified it because there's no such. We've never seen a cold case certification, a cold case investigator certification. There isn't one. So we said, all right, then we're going to create it ourselves, and we're going to call it that. And nobody's called us out on it. And so, if a case is 10, 20, 30 years old, it's time to let somebody else. And I hate the term fresh set of eyes. You hear that all the time. Oh, the case just needs a fresh set of eyes. No, it doesn't. It just needs to be investigated properly. It's not about the eyes. It's about the what and the how. Mm-hmm. And how is it going to be investigated? Not a fresh set of eyes.
Right.
Because
So
anybody can just go look at it, right?
right, right.
That's what I noticed. Oh, wow, this looks like a really cool case. No, that's not what it's about.
So, well, we've just got a couple more minutes here. Here's another one. Do status of limitations apply?
Okay. They do in some cases, but generally, if new evidence is brought forward, then statute of limitations does not apply. So, in other words, if you do find, either DNA evidence, physical evidence, or someone comes forward and says, "Hey, I know who did this," or know something, then actually, in most states, statute of limitations does not apply.
Okay, we're coming down to the end here, and wanted to talk about scams. Will you come back again another time and let's talk about?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to because because listen, you and I have talked a lot about scams. I've not read your book, but I feel like I have because you and I have talked so much, and I feel like I know everything there is in both of those books.
Right. So we'll work on that as to when you can come back. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to have, what is that? The 26th? I've forgotten already. This is the 26th. So next week is Pastor Carl Litchfield. I hope you have a happy Easter and a good weekend. And thank you, Matt, for coming and talking with us about this. I really think we learned a lot, and I appreciate it. And gee, if I were younger, I might take your training. I'm going to see if I can get involved with that Operation Shamrock. Did you read about that on advocating against romance scams? But this is the pig butchering, and that's another story. So thanks a lot, and thank you, Rebel. I appreciate everything that you do.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.